Welcome to Everyday Economics, the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm Chris Krug, your host, and president of the 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can listen to all of our podcasts at americastalking.com. To support Everyday Economics, please make your tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We are recording this episode on Friday, September 1st. Joining me as always, my friend, colleague, and partner, Dr. Orphe Divounguy, PhD economist. Dr. O, I want to jump right into it. I saw a story this week about the incentives, and this is a story that CNN published. And the headline of that story was, the auto industry switch to EVs gets $12 billion in loans and grants from the U.S. Department of Energy. I love cars, and I've been following this, the electrification of the automobile story, really since it became commonplace, maybe, 12, 15 years ago. You really started to see electric vehicles start to show up, all the way back to the Tesla Roadster and even the failed initiatives before that. Here's my question. If we're subsidizing the auto industry to build these cars, and we're then subsidizing the buyers to buy these cars, where does this end? I mean, how does, I understand the idea behind this, and it's climate focused, and we can argue that. And we've talked about what the amount of energy that it requires to build an electric vehicle versus a gas combustion vehicle. But just, in an economy, if you're subsidizing the manufacturers and you're subsidizing the buyers, where does it end? And what's the hope?
That's a great question. I mean, it's good for people in that industry, right? And it's also good for people who want to minimize their carbon footprint. So it's really a game of taking from one industry, and it's a reallocation. So, there are going to be some losers in that, and there's going to be some winners. It's just a case of government picking winners and losers. That's really what this is about. It's not really about any kind of new economic activity or anything. It's just taking away from one side and giving to the other.
And I'm not trying to pick on the auto manufacturers because, frankly, they're winners and winners in this scenario, because with the exception of a handful of companies that are still trying to figure their way to profitability, and I'm talking about specifically in the American market, Rivian and Lucid, it's kind of the new players in this EV space, that virtually every auto manufacturer in the world that sells automobiles in the United States has either already is in the EV space or has a path to the EV space through a hybrid plug-in type product. But at what point in time do you have to pull the plug, no pun intended, on either side of this equation?
Totally. I don't think, it depends on government priorities, right? And I think government spending definitely matters in the sense that some things have positive ROI and some things have negative ROI. And people in the place that's most prioritized are going to be winners. Today, if you own some Tesla stock, for example, you're going to be doing all right. Now, here's I think the part that I think is important for listeners is that while subsidies will help prop up an industry, there could be unintended consequences. And the unintended consequences, the one thing I would use is when you have too much free money out there, use free money with air quotes. What you tend to have is these phantom companies, right? These ghosts, these industries, these companies that are not necessarily very good at what they do, that are not very productive, and that are wasteful. It tends to result in a misallocation of resources. You end up with bubbles that form, right? We talk about bubbles a lot. And then those bubbles burst, right? And so I think it's, when, you have to be very careful. We see that often when the Fed keeps interest rates too low for too long, right? You start to see bubbles forming. If you start to invest heavily into a sector or an industry or even a particular company, and that company does not deliver on its promise, right? Because they're not very efficient, because they're relying on funds coming from the government or from some other source, and they're not very accountable, right? Or because maybe there's even some corruption. We see that a lot in developing countries, right?
But specific to this industry, I think there's also, the idea that this technology is still nascent to a degree that success is not necessarily the benchmark. That we have rewarded companies for going out and trying and subsidize those efforts, I guess. But I guess maybe, I don't know, is that part of the American way to stimulate innovation?
Think about the companies you invest in your portfolio, right? You go out on a limb and you invest in companies that you believe in, will be successful in the future, right? You're forward looking. So to some extent, there's a lot of that going on, but ultimately you got to be careful. You just have to be careful when you play that game. So it's a bit of a gamble. We do it all the time. And in any case, that's kind of how I see it. Hopefully you're going to see them deliver, a positive return on that investment. And I think most of them will, but clearly not all of them. And so there will be some winners and losers for sure.
I guess that's the way that it always goes. But I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this.
Yeah, the gamble, it's a gamble, and we're all part of it because, whether you agree with the subsidies or not, you're still buying Tesla stock. So you must believe in the company.
In fact, I don't believe in the subsidies if that didn't come through in my comments, but I do own Tesla stock and I do believe in what that company is doing.
And that it will return, that it will give, it will increase productivity. It will improve the world to some extent. And it's a company that has a ton of upside. And that's why we all believe in it and we invest in it, right? So, but yeah, you're right. Subsidies, free money, I don't know. And I use free money in air quotes because these subsidies come from taxpayers, and that's the reality of it all.
Hey, good talk as always, Dr. O. For Orphe Divounguy, this is Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other podcasts at americastalking.com.